recording. All right, we are now recording. Should be a brief description. This is it's a pretty easy set of problems, I think. So we're going to go back to Brightspace. Now, if we go to this document, let's look at the seed firewalls here. Now, it's possible, so remember, these documents, you need to read through them, but it's possible that I'm not going to assign every single problem from these documents. Instead, we are just going to do selected topics, okay? So if I look at this document, I really just, the only two things that I am mainly concerned about that I want to cover still from this handout are proxy firewalls and also firewall evasion or bypassing a firewall. So I'll just basically have those two sets of problems, and we may not do, other things. Like I'm still debating whether we're going to do the LKM. This involves a little bit of C++ coding. So we'll see if time permits at the end of the semester. But otherwise, so as you remember from this document, that you hopefully read already, you've also read chapter 17. Task 1, this one is basically the problem set of IP tables, right? You can see there talks about IP tables. So just refer back to that other document and do those 10. This is wherever you see the loadable kernel module LKM. As I said, this involves a little bit of C++. So if time permits, we will come back to this at the end of the semester. But otherwise, really, my priority would be here, right? And, firewall evasion. So I'm just going to set a couple of problems. This is pretty easy, pretty straightforward. I'll explain it today. And then the other one will be, as you can see, this one, proxy firewalls, okay? And that one relates to a program called Squid. So really, given that we don't have that much time left in the semester, it'd be nice if we could do all these problems. I strongly, these are a lot of fun. So certainly I would recommend that you guys do them on your own, right? That's one thing to do. But I'm just going to set some basic problems from here that I want you to do. And basically, they're going to relate to this little diagram. That's going to be the one problem, which it's basically firewall evasion. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about what is a proxy firewall. And for that, we're going to need actually a service. Okay, we're going to need a service. In this case, a service called Squid, or the Squid program. Hey, everything else, as I said, you can just read through for your own information. All right, so let's take a look then at this scenario. So let's read a little bit. So the topic for today, so there's two topics then, which are firewall evasion or evading egress filtering, right? So as you know, evading ingress filtering is, well, basically impossible, right? So you cannot really evade ingress filtering. Why is that? Because the firewall, regardless of what it is, it drops all traffic coming in from the outside, originating from the outside into the network, okay? So hopefully that makes sense at this time. All right, so as I was saying, it's basically impossible to evade ingress filtering, right? So, you'd have to have a port open of some kind, and usually all ports are open. The only way to get in originating from the outside is, something like VPN. And usually for VPN, you need the keys anyway, so that's very difficult to guess those. So that's going to be a challenge. However, evading egress filtering is certainly a possibility. So what does that mean? So evading egress is when you are going to actually you have some rules in the firewall. Your communication is initiating from the inside of the network, and you want to bypass these somehow. Okay, so let's take a look at some scenarios. So here we can see you should be seeing on Brightspace the Word document or the PDF document. So let's take a look at this scenario here. It should be pretty easy to understand. So many companies and schools enforce egress filtering, which blocks users inside of their networks from reaching out to certain websites, okay, or internet services. And this actually is that's going to be the scenario for both the proxy firewall and also for firewall evasion, right? So going from the inside out. So they do allow users to access other websites. In many cases, this type of firewall inspect the destination IP address, the port number of the outgoing packets. So, this is really important, okay? So pay attention to this. So this type of firewalls inspect the destination IP address and or the port number, right, in the outgoing packet. So the service, basically. All right. So if a packet matches the restrictions, it will be dropped. Okay. They usually do not conduct deep packet inspections. That is looking into the data packet, the data part for packets. So it doesn't look at the payload, for instance. Because as you know, as we've mentioned many times already, because of performance. In this task, basically this topic, we show how such egress filtering can be bypassed using the tunnel mechanism. And actually, this is again another aspect, another thing that's really nice for our last topic of the semester, which is general topic VPN and all of that. Which, as you know, VPNs are nothing more than secure tunnels, encrypted tunnels. So we'll talk a little bit about encryption, but you've already covered a lot of encryption in 350. All right, so there are many ways to establish tunnels. In this task, we only focus on SSH tunnels. As you guys know, I'm sure from 372, you might remember you can use Netcat. Here in the labs, also this semester, you've used various tools to create redirections and tunnels. But we're just gonna think of SSH. Why SSH? Well, it kind of makes sense because an SSH tunnel is encrypted, right? And so if you're encrypting data in the tunnel, it's difficult for the firewall to take a look at it. So what do you need to accomplish these problems? So you need two VMs, A and B, for this task. 3 would be better. So machine A is running behind a firewall, right? So that's how you have to think about it, right? So machine A is running behind a firewall, inside the company or the school's network. And machine B is outside of the firewall, okay? So this is, so we'll talk about this in a couple of ways, but that's the general idea. So you have a machine inside your network and a machine outside your network. And your packets need to go from the inside to the outside through the firewall itself, okay? So typically there's a dedicated machine that runs the firewall, but in this task, for the sake of convenience, you can run the firewall on machine A. So the same machine basically that initiates the traffic will have the rules, right? So you're gonna have to implement some rules. So you can use IP tables to set up the following 2 firewall rules, okay? So the idea here is, if you look, it's basically about blocking via give me a second. So it's about blocking via either the service, which would be the port number, or via the IP address or the domain, right? To make things easy, we're just going to use port numbers and IP. So think about the scenario. So you'll set up these rules in IP tables, right? something that you already know how to do. Probably on the output chain, right? Because these are initiating from the inside, going outside. So you wanna think about that a little bit. All right, so the goal will be for the first rule, block all outgoing traffic to external telnet servers. Okay, so that means port 23, right? So you're gonna block by service. So any packets going to telnet would be dropped, okay? So block all outgoing traffic to external telnet servers. In reality, the servers that are blocked are usually something like game servers or other types of servers that could affect the productivity of employees, something like that. In this task, you can use the telnet service for demonstration purposes. Now, you can run a telnet server on machine B, right? So that's your goal. You're going to go from A to B via telnet. If you have a third VM, machine C, you can run the telnet server on machine C. And this will make a little bit more sense when I draw the diagram. I'll explain that. Now, the second rule will be about blocking all outgoing traffic to, let's say, something like Facebook.com. Keep in mind, if you now remember this, if you ping or telnet or something like that to www.facebook.com, they have multiple IP addresses. So you probably want to just block by specific IP, and that's okay. So kids, employees, etc., are not distracted. So social network sites are commonly blocked by companies and schools. So after you set up the firewall, launch your Firefox browser and try to connect to Facebook and report what happens. Right, so that's, then it gives you instructions about clearing your history here. If everything is set up properly, you should not be able to see Facebook pages. It should be noted that Facebook has many IP addresses, and so you can use another IP address like syracuse.edu, which might have fewer PNW or something like that. All right, but the goal here is the same as in the previous problem. You're going to block a specific address, right? Like let's say pnw.edu, purdue.edu, just some fixed IP address. So before the rule is set, obviously you can reach it. Then once the rule is set, you cannot reach it anymore. So the same happens with the telnet. First you set it up. No, sorry. First you try to go to telnet. You're able to do that. Then you add the IP tables rule. Now you can't. All right. So that's the scenario. Once you've done that and you can't reach those two, the IP or the service, then what you need to do is you need to bypass it. Okay, you're going to bypass it, and that's where you get the trick, basically. Okay, that how do we bypass things? And then this is the scenario. So let's take a look. So what you want to do, let's say that you have 3 machines, right? So you have this machine, that machine, and this machine. So what you want to do is you have a telnet client, right? And you want to go to a telnet server. But you can't really, because when you go through the firewall, it blocks it, or the same applies to IP. So what you need to do is to bypass the tunnel, or sorry, to bypass the firewall, is you need another machine somewhere on the internet. You create an SSH tunnel between them. So that is to say, from your telnet client, you connect to that telnet server. And if you look, the packets that go through the firewall are SSH packets, right? So now whenever you want to reach the telnet server, what you need to do is you can't directly send them through the firewall. That's not going to work. So instead, what you do is you send your telnet packets into this port 8000, which would be the beginning of the encrypted tunnel. And then once you send the packet, the telnet packets will be encapsulated inside SSH packets. So that's the way they get through the tunnel. When they come out on the SSH server, they basically come out as telnet packets, and they'll have all the respective information so that the SSH server can redirect them to the telnet server. And that's it. I mean, that's literally how you do it. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions? So this is the scenario for both IP and a service. Okay, great. So it sounds like you guys are getting it. So that's what you have to do. Okay, and then the rest of this is just the instructions. Okay, so telnet to machine B through the firewall. So, and then here, you know, you just have to read through this to bypass the firewall. You know, it's basically what I just explained, and all the commands are provided here. Okay, so you just have to follow them, and that's it. You have to run this exercise for two, as I said, for an IP and an SSH service. So that will be one link. I'm going to create one link for homework, and I'm just going to say bypass, you know, what I just described. All right, I got a question that I did not understand here. Okay. All right, so oh, okay. All right. All right, so that's the first problem for today, okay? Just this. That's it. Okay, so I'll say in the problem, you know, firewall evasion problem, write two rules, one for IP for in IP tables, one to block a specific IP, one to block a specific service like telnet. Okay, implement those rules, show that any traffic going from the inside out is blocked. Then evade those rules by implementing the scenario of using an SSH tunnel. I think that should be enough and clear for you to understand. Okay, so that's problem one, firewall evasion. Are there any questions before I move on to the next problem? Okay, doesn't sound like there's any questions. All right, so the next question then, or problem, the last one, is the proxy firewall, okay? So you can follow these instructions here. And so let's look at the other document for this one. Remember, read these three documents. Let's go here. The same diagram. Okay, where is, here it is, web proxy. So you can see here this one that says web proxy. A web proxy is a type of a firewall. Okay, it's a type of a firewall, but it is basically usually, instead of being like a physical firewall, it's more of like a Linux server. All right, so it's almost like snort, a type of a snort device. A web proxy is just a server, and what happens with that type of a server is that you basically, it's kind of addressed towards the browser. So you have a browser, right? You have your browser, and then people want to go to specific sites. So again, they want to go to pnw.edu or syracuse.edu, or they want to go to facebook.com, right? And what you do is, all you have to do is, you have to install on one computer in your network this program. So here are the instructions, okay? So just again, you know, install squid, sudo apt-get install squid should be enough. And then here's the start and restart. It comes with a configuration file, right? So you can see that you have to go to etc squid, right? And then once you go there, you have to find this squid.configuration file, just like you usually do in Linux configuration. And then you have to set a rule. All right, so all you have to do is that. And then what you need to do is you're going to go into your, you need to go into your browser. And to get to your browser, you're going to follow these instructions. Okay? All right, so you go into your browser and you're going to set some parameters so that the browser will have to go through a specific port. Let's see, hold on, sorry. I'm in the wrong place. Here, these instructions, they look the same. All right, so you're gonna go to these, follow these instructions, and you're going to configure your browser so that whenever somebody goes into the browser will use a proxy firewall. So that basically means they usually need to go to port 3128 of some machine before they go out into the network. And that machine is going to be the machine that is hosting Squid, because Squid is listening on port 3128. So when the traffic comes in, you know, you're going to have some rules in that file. Okay, you're going to have some rules in that file that prevent you from going somewhere like google.com, etc. Right? So in this scenario, again, you know, let me go to the whiteboard. So for this scenario, let's call this Proxy Firewall. This is homework problem 2, let's say, right? Proxy Firewall, right? And all you have to do is you go to the web browser. You know, in this case, Mozilla Firefox, and you need to configure it to use the proxy firewall. Okay, and then now this is, you know, this would be like your network's firewall here, but then here somewhere in your network there is Squid, and that is basically, it's listening on port 3128, and so that's the proxy firewall right there. Okay, so they're both connected to the same network, let's say, right? And so now what happens is, whenever your web browser, you know, normally your web browser would just do that, right? Would do that, and then it would go into the web. But in this case, configure the browser to, instead of going to the internet directly, it needs to go first to Squid, then back out into the internet. Does this make sense, guys? And so what you have to do is you need to add some rules, add rules in Squid. And so in this case, I just, you know, very simple, you just need to show, you know, first, you know, go to Google, right? And you should normally get to Google, but then you activate a rule, you need to show what the rule is in Squid. And then once you activate the rule, Squid should block Google. And that's it. That's a proxy firewall, and you know, it's as simple as that. That's all really we need to do to understand this concept. Okay, so that's homework problem 1, right? Squid. And then I'll write here homework. Oh, that was problem 2. Problem 1 is, again, you have the firewall, you have a telnet, and you have a SSH. And then this is the inside network. This is the outside. And then here you have a client of some kind. The firewall has a rule, you know, IP tables blocks telnet, which is port 23. So that telnet will not get through, okay? That telnet will not get through directly. So doing that will not work. However, you can establish a tunnel because SSH is not blocked, right? So this is an SSH tunnel. And then what you're going to do is you're going to send packets. Your telnet will go into the tunnel, out of the tunnel, and reach that other server that way. And that's it, right? And the instructions are in the document. So these are the only two problems that I want you to work on. Are there any questions on homework problem 1? It's called, this one is
No questions.
Firewall, give me a sec. Firewall Egress Evasion. Questions? Guys, any questions? All right, so good. So it sounds like you guys are getting it. That's good. So as you can see, very easy. I don't, no need to give you a whole bunch of problems for this. I think they very clearly address what you do. The reason why this works is, remember, the firewall just checks for port 23. But if you send something via SSH, you're sending it via port 22, and the actual telnet packet is just encapsulated and encrypted within the payload. So, it just gets through, no problem. And that's a very nice way of, of evading things, right? So you can always do this, that's it. And then problem 1, as I said, this is the proxy firewall. Proxy firewall. And as I said, here you just set up a squid program in the web browser. You have to configure it to use the proxy. Follow that, and then you just add some rules in there. So you can use the document. So if we go back, let me actually, hold on. Let me just save that. All right. So okay. Let's go back to the PDF. And like I said, this document then, where you see it titled Web Proxy Application Firewall, just read through that. All the instructions are there. It's pretty straightforward. All right, and that's it. All right, so those are the two problems. Let me, before I forget, let me just add this to the bright space. And then after that, I'll just open it up to questions that you might have. Actually, hold on. I need to switch over to bright space here. Okay. All right, so if we go now to table of contents, right? So you have this homework assignment that, if you have any questions today about it, you can ask. Oh, not that one. Right, so you have this. That's the set of problems. And here's the link for it, IP tables homework, due April 15th, okay? Now, for what I just discussed, I'm going to put those in this one here, seed firewalls, okay? Those are the documents, and I'm just going to create, I'm going to add, first of all, what I just wrote on the whiteboard. So let me add that. So it is homework problems. And, okay, you can see now, if we click on this document, PDF, you can see it's basically what I just wrote. So problem 2 is right there, and problem 1 is right here. This is what you have to implement, okay? So let me go ahead and just add the link for these in here. So I'm going to do new assignment, homework. I'm going to call this evasion, firewall, evasion, and proxy firewall. Okay. So this one will just have 2 problems. This is going to be due on the 22nd, okay? 22nd by 10 p.m. It should be pretty easy to do. 22nd, 24th. All right, so complete the following. Okay, so problem 1 is going to be firewall evasion. Problem 2 is going to be proxy firewall. So complete the following as discussed in the lecture video. And you can just reference this video, which will be pretty short, just a 30 minute video. Is this clear enough, guys, for the homework?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So, all right, great. All right. So I'm adding this, as you can see, and I will be posting the video later tonight, of course. All right. So again, I'll repeat. Firewall evasion, proxy firewalls. You can see the diagrams here. Right. That's it. And then you can read through all the instructions. And as I said, unfortunately, we just don't have enough time for the, because there's a lot of other interesting concepts in these documents, all these 3. So just read them. I think honestly, just reading through them should be pretty interesting. But as far as homework, I'm going to keep it simple to just. All right, so that's basically firewall. So that concludes firewalls. Okay, that. At this point, I've concluded the topic of firewalls for these labs. And now we are ready then on Monday to start working on VPN. All right, so I'm going to, at this point, stop the recording.